I was going to make a video on Evergrande, which is a Chinese land developing, they build buildings. They're the biggest builder of apartments, office towers, and shopping malls, the biggest in the private sector of conglomerates. And that company is headed for default, meaning it cannot actually pay its debts. And that's a huge problem. One of the things that I want to do was I wanted to go through the company and explain how it works, etc., and what's going on. That is to say, it has about 1,300 projects in 280 cities with assets worth about 2.3 trillion yuan, or 350 billion US. But then the further I looked into the problem with Evergrande, the more I realized this whole problem literally proves that China is capitalist. Evergrande's founder, Zhu Jiayin, was China's richest entrepreneur in 2017 with a net worth of about $43 billion. Now, since then, other people have passed him, but he's still ranked as China's richest real estate developer, which is apparently socialism. Because socialism is when you have billionaires, guys, when you have a private accumulation of wealth, when you have private property, when you have the anarchy of production, markets. And this is a perfect example of that, because the company is now in a massive amount of debt, about 37.3 billion US dollars. And now there's a question of whether or not they're going to be able to pay their payout shares today, which would be Thursday. And if they don't, if they can't come to a way of paying their debt, then the government is going to have to step in. And essentially what the government is going to do is bail it out. Because Evergrande is literally too big to fail. It has its hand in too many businesses. The world's largest real estate developer. China's largest real estate developer. And if that goes down, all those properties that it's associated with go down too. And what we're seeing is very likely a US 2008 style failure. Now, it's not going to have the same impact. It's not going to be a thing that goes out through the entire sector and crashes everything. It's going to be more isolated towards that one sector. But it's the same, but essentially the same thing. A massive amount of retail real estate debt that can't be paid. But we're supposed to believe China uses economic plans, 5-year plans. Even though apparently being the company with the greatest amount of debt, and the fact that the company ran on debt, literally, and that the entire real estate developing industry in China runs on debt, which is not really any different than any other country, but that's kind of the point. But apparently these are 5-year plans to run things on debt deliberately. And then have the government come in and bail out a private company because it's too big to fail. If at this point you can really look at the anarchy of production being the market, production for exchange value, because if that's not it and it really is an economic plan, then I would like to know where in the economic plan that Z thought dragon dildos for export to the West fit into the whole plan. The fact is, it's not. It's got private property, and the fact that it leases property from the government doesn't make it socialism. So what? I can lease land from the government here. That doesn't make it socialist. But the China defenders will say, yeah, but China is a Marxist party. How do you know that it's a Marxist party? Because it does these things. These things that are very clearly capitalist. Well, how do you know these things are Marxist? Because the Chinese government's doing it. And the Chinese government is socialist. Okay, how do you know they're socialist? Because of these socialist things that they do. And how do you know those things are socialist, even though they're not? Because a socialist, it's circular reasoning. And that's exactly what the China defenders do. Just whenever you point out something's capitalism, just say, oh, it's not capitalism because it's a Marxist party. How do you know it's a Marxist party? Because of these things that they do. China's biggest real estate developer is struggling to avoid defaulting on tens of billions of dollars of debt. Because apparently that was the economic plan. No. China has guidelines. These are the kinds of things that we want to establish in the next 5 years. An economic plan is when you have a formula for literally planning out the economy, with price inputs. With inputs for wages, and then it outputs in a mathematical calculation. The Feldman-Manubis model that the Soviets used is literally what economic planning is. And to a lesser degree, the budgetary finance system that Cuba uses, or used to use. China is not socialist. If you can really look yourself in the mirror and say, a proletarian state is when people want to jump off a building to get out of a contract for basically slave labor. Yes, I know you're going to respond, my suicide nets. If deliberately producing for exchange value and not use value isn't enough to tell you that China is not socialist, there is no help for you, or you simply have a level of cognitive dissonance that is beyond explanation. The Chinese government is now on a campaign to lower the amount of debt in the country that private businesses are running on. See, they're reining them in. That means it's socialism. Except that in socialism, private businesses don't exist. Capitalists don't exist. That's the point. When you have a government that just reins in the capitalists, that's called social democracy. Except when China does it, because then it's socialist. We're really at a point where if the defaulting of this company doesn't finally kick it into your head that China is capitalist and that it is now becoming imperialist, you don't have a shred of integrity whatsoever. This couldn't be any more in your face. The Chinese government is going to bail out a private company, just like the U.S. bailed out companies during the Great Recession. And once again, they're just going to turn around and say, yeah, but it's the Chinese government doing it, so therefore it's socialist, and begin the whole circular reasoning again. So this was supposed to be an explanation of what was going on with Evergrande. But I think it's more important to actually take this and use it as an explanation, a final wake-up call that China is not socialist. It's capitalist with a heavy amount of state oversight, which is called social democracy. But there'd have to be any shred of democracy inside of China for that to be the case. So once again, at this point, if you don't get it, if you don't see that China is actually capitalist, there is no hope for you.